Hi everyone and welcome back. Welcome to my playlist. I'm covering nestjs GraphQL with all different ORMs. Like we have already covered nestjs GraphQL with the mongoose, with the type ORM, Postgres. This video is for nestjs GraphQL Prisma app. And first we are going to talk about nestjs GraphQL Prisma app schema first approach, because there are two approaches, schema first and the code first approach. So first we are going to talk about schema first approach. So I have already created a separate playlist. If you are beginner, if you are not aware what is Prisma, how it works, how it is different from type ORM or any other ORM, then you can take a look. Otherwise, just get started if you're already aware. So what I already have is the Docker Compose file and all the required files I have to spin up the container. So what do you see on the screen is the Docker Compose and Compose override file, and I'm using the same setup of Docker containers in each and every video. This is Docker Compose file, and then there is a override file, and when I do Docker Compose up, it should be able to spin up the Postgres container for me with example API database. If I just check, because we are going to use Postgres for this, I will just remove this database which we already have, and then we can create the container again. That is the first thing, because here we are going to talk about Prisma. Prisma will use some kind of a data source, either a Postgres, MongoDB, MySQL or something else. So let's create first Prisma folder on our root workspace. The default code is just a nest CLI generated code, and here we have to create a schema file. That is the first thing we have to do. Schema.prisma file, and here we start defining, okay, what is our data source and all these things. And I already have a plugin, it should help me in writing this file, data source db. So provider is PostgreSQL, and URL will be, I will be getting this from environment. So whatever, because when you do Prisma generate, Prisma migrate, it will look into .env, look for database URL, and will load that variable in the process.env and will start using it. Okay, then we will just specify generator client. I think now it should start supporting autocomplete generator client, and we have to specify provider here. Provider is a Prisma client.js. You're already familiar that Prisma will generate a client for us, and here we can start specifying the models. Let's say model post. Here ID is of type int, title is of type string. We have written a lot of models like this. Content is of type string, published, it has specific language, we have to follow that. At the default is false. Same is created at, this is of date time type, and the default value will be now whatever is the current date timestamp is the default value. Okay, so what we did is we created a basic schema. Now why it is complaining, provider URL PostgreSQL, provider is a PostgreSQL. Okay, I put the comma, that was the mistake. Created at datetime and default is now, that is a function, and now it is complaining. Let's see what is that. Content and okay, for ID we have to add auto increment. I'm working with different framework and it's easy to forget these kind of syntax, so you can take the reference. it should be auto increment. Now it is fine. So we have just a simple demoable Prisma schema created. We have Docker Compose up already running, Docker container, and then we can just start executing some commands to migrate. I mean, we have to generate the migration, then execute the migration against the database. So we don't need to generate because we are already writing the schema inside a Prisma schema.prisma file, which is inside a Prisma folder. Then we need to have this one npm script to run the migration. So what I will do is npm run migrate. It will look into schema.prisma file. It will check the Postgres SQL, load the database URL, and create this table. It will first create the client if you do the Prisma generate in your node modules, Prisma client. When you do Prisma migrate, it will create this table if doesn't exist. I mean, if no existing migration exists for post which has been executed, otherwise it will create a new one. So we can do is npm run migrate. So what this is going to do is Prisma migrate dev. It will just load the environment variable from .env file. It will see, okay, data sources example API. It will connect to the database, and we already have the database URL in the .env file. That is important part. Don't miss this. You have to populate the database URL, the exact database URL with the username, password, host, port, and the database name. Okay, you can enter the name of the migration, otherwise it will take the default one. Okay, so you can see migration has been generated. This is the migration file. This is just creating the post table, right? Now you can add couple of more tables, couple of more migration models, like, okay, user, whatever you want to do, user model. So what you can do, you can create a user schema for that. So let's create a couple of more. Let's say I'm going to create a user schema. Okay, so what it will be, simply model user. Okay, and here you can actually use couple of these attributes, copy it as it is. I think the attributes we are going to change: ID, it can be email, which is of type string, name string, then we have password. Okay, so email, we want to have this as a unique, name is a string, password is a string. And then you can also have different references, like, because it's a RDBMS relational database where you have to specify one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many kind of relationship. I'm just keeping it like simple. We have the user. Similarly, we can have post. We already have post. We can also have a category schema, like what will be the category of a particular post created by user. And then you can also model the relationship in all these. So ID, it can be simply name of the category. ID, name, description, and allow this for the execution. We will execute the same command, npm run migrate. It will just check, okay, user and category, something new has been added. So I will run the migration, and I will just create these tables against the same database. And you can also do npm run generate command. Generate command should actually generate the client for us, same as the migrate. So migrate is actually migrating the tables, migrating the schema to the actual database, and generate is creating the Prisma client, because we keep changing the code and we have to generate the client again and again. So let's say if we execute Prisma generate command here, so this is my package JSON, and I will just add one more command. So it is calling Prisma generate command, loading environment variables, and it should Prisma schema loaded into Prisma schema, and then it should create the updated client in the node modules. So this is the Prisma and this is the client, and here you can see all the models created. So what all model we have? Model post, model user, and then model category. Everything is updated. So when you go into the node modules dot Prisma and the client, if you see everything works fine, that means your client is updated. And then now you can start using the Prisma objects like this, like Prisma.user, Prisma.category, Prisma.post, something like that, because the client is available and you can start consuming this. Okay, let's see that in the next video. Okay, so now what we can do is we can create the Prisma service, we can create the post module and all these things. So this is our source folder, totally empty with just a basic structure. Here what we are going to do, we are going to create a Prisma service which will do the Prisma, which will connect to the database, which will just talk to the Prisma client and will tell us if we are good with the connection or not. Prisma.service.ts. So here we are going to use the Prisma client. So import Prisma client from Prisma client, and we are going to import it from Prisma client. Okay, and then we can just create an injectable service, and this service will initialize the connection. Export class. Okay, we have to import all these things. Export class Prisma service which is extending Prisma client. Okay, and this is implementing the on module init, so that we can use on init method and do the connection check. Implements on module init. Okay, this is an interface, so we have to define the method. So we can just use on module init. Inside this method we can do this dot $connect. This method will make sure that we are connected or not, and that is just a shutdown hook, like whenever you are destroying the application, then before exit the application should get closed. That is just for clearing the resources. So it is taking app argument, app which is the nestjs application. And what it is doing is it is just checking for this particular event, this dot $on. So we are looking for before exit event. Before exit, do this to close the application. Okay, we need to import a couple of things from nestjs common. On module init, this should also comes from nestjs common. Okay, this is how it is looking on module init. I don't know why it is complaining, does not have exported member on module init. Okay, I think O is in the uppercase. Okay, so this is a Prisma service. We have to use this Prisma service in the app module. Now we can start talking about our posts. So this is the post module we are going to do. Inside the post we will create the resolver, the service, post model, post.module.ts. We also have to specify the schema and then pass all these schema path in the GraphQL module.forRoot method. So here it will be schema.graphql. Okay, let's first define the schema, what all query mutations we are going to write, and the same we have to populate in the resolvers and service. So service will just do the Prisma CRUD operation. Then we have resolver. Resolver will define all the queries and mutation. I mean how to act on the queries and mutation. So we have ID required. This is the title, which is of type string. Content, again type of string and required. Published, of type boolean, and created at type string. Okay, so now we can also create some input types, some custom types which we can use to pass in the resolver. Like I wanted to create a new post, what all things you needed. I need title, which is of type string required, and content of type string required. Then we have update post. So update post is again another input type we can create, and then we can create type query, type mutation. Inside type query I wanted to fetch all the posts created. So what it is going to return, all the post. Its post should be an array, and it is taking, okay, give me a particular post. So that is post by ID. So this is ID of type ID, that is required, and it is returning a single post. Okay, mutation, we have a couple of methods. Create post, it is going to take the input type new post. We can use these custom types we have created. Input type new post, and it is going to return a post, and then we have update post, and it is going to take this input, this custom type updated post, and it is also going to return a single post. And then delete post, which is taking ID of type ID, and it is going to return a single post. So these are the queries and mutation in the GraphQL schema language. I can format this later. Okay, now we need to write resolver and the service. Okay, we can create now Prisma service and Prisma resolver. Prisma service is simple, it is just injectable class. So we already have Prisma service created. Now we can start adding the methods. Let's say async post. So this can be used for getting the post by ID. Either it will return promise of single post or null. Okay, and what we will do is we can just use this Prisma service, this dot Prisma dot. Now you can see all the entities are there. Dot find one unique based on your selection criteria. Okay, here we have where query, the ID is number ID. Okay, if this is there, otherwise it will return null, and you can import all the other required things. Import post from this injectable, we can import from nestjs common post. Now what all other methods we can think of? Okay, give me all the post, get multiple post, So we'll just use copy and paste. So let's say there are three methods we have: async posts, give me all the posts. It will not take any argument. It is going to return the array of all the posts, and we are going to fire find many method on the Prisma client, Prisma model, find many without any where clause. This should be able to return us all the posts. Then we have create post. Okay, now for create post we have input, and then new post. This is the typing we have, but new post is not an interface we have created. So how we are going to get the typings for these custom types you have created, new post, updated post, right? How we are going to do this? So there is another way of doing it. You can generate the TypeScript typings from your schema file. So for that, I think we already have this generate typings.ts. It's just using GraphQL definition factory, and it is doing calling generate. You need to pass the .graphql files, and it will give you the GraphQL.ts. So you can execute this command node, or you can also execute npm run typings. I think I added something in the package.json. You can execute this ts file using ts node. So if I do this, if I do this, what it will do is it will generate the schema.ts file. So if you generate typings.ts, it will generate GraphQL.ts file which contains all the typings. So if you look into src, we have something like this, and it has all the types: export class new post, updated post, post. I mean, it's not recommended. I mean, it's recommended, but you can also write DTOs to manage that. So here inside post resolver, I can use the generated Prisma typings. So for that, is it not exported? Exported new post, export class new post, and we can use this here for the inputs. And then we are passing id. Id is okay. We are going to change this. This is a create post. Create post is taking this payload. This prisma.post.create is the method, and you can simply pass data as input. This will do the creation. And then if you talk about update post, so instead of input new post, there will be update post. And then what we will do is this prisma.post.update is the command I will execute, and inside update I will whom you are going to update. So you need an ID for that. So first I will get all the attributes outside this payload. So we have input, and we already know what all attribute this blog post contains. So we have ID, title, content, published, and this is update post. We need to get these typings correct, and then here update where ID is this and the data is this, because it takes two arguments: the where clause where you can specify the ID, and here you have to pass the object. So there is a shortcut, like, because this is the, you are not going to update all the attributes together. Let's say I am passing published. If I am passing it, then return the published object, otherwise do not include it. So instead of writing the if else kind of stuff, this is the quick and nice way of managing things. So if published is there, if title is there, pass the title as a property. If content is there, pass the content as a property, and it should be able to update. Then the last we have is delete post. It's kind of simple. Delete post is just calling delete method prisma.model.delete and it will delete it. Okay, I need to get these typing straight. src GraphQL, and then I have update post. I can just directly update the import definition. So this is the post service. Now my resolver is going to use this service to create post, list post, update post, and delete post. So our next thing is resolver. We put this code in different file. This should be in the service, and this is my resolver, and I will just name this as a post resolver. Okay, and here I'm going to use this post service which we have created. Instead of using Prisma service, I just copied the service into the resolver, so we don't need to write much code. Here I have post service. Now here I need to use the query and mutations and all these methods instead of all this method, because I'm going to call this post service from post resolver. So let's see how it look like, and then we will just quickly jump to the demo. So here we have constructor, we injected the post service there, we imported it, and now let's say our simple one is the query. Give me all the posts. Okay, and this is async posts, and here I'm going to call return this dot post service. Let's call it as a post service. This dot post service dot posts. It will return you all the posts, and that is what you needed. Similarly, we have other query like get post by ID. So we can just add another one. Then we have 3 mutations. So this is the query for the single post, async post, and here we are passing a single argument. So argument, this is ID, and this argument is of type string. So this is a single argument, and you can just pass that here argument. Okay, let's fix this. What are these warnings and errors? So argument is coming from nestjs GraphQL. It's args, and then query. It should not complain now. Okay, we have, let's see this. Route handler parameter decorator exactly the query. Find. Okay, sorry, this should be a resolver, and this is this is resolving the post, and then we can import it from nestjs GraphQL. Okay, this query we mistakenly imported from somewhere else. It should come from nestjs GraphQL, and now we see things correct. Similarly, we have mutations. I will directly write them down. Mutations: create post, update post, delete post. Right, and just import the mutations, and I will fix this thing. Okay, now our resolver and the service is ready. Now we need to plug it into a module, and we need to pass that module into the app module. That's it. We are ready. We can just check how it is working. So this is our app module. We imported the post module there, and we are just using GraphQL module here, .4 root, and Prisma module. We are not directly using something like Prisma module.4 root or nothing like that, because we have generated the Prisma client, and we just have a Prisma service which is just checking the connection to the database and releasing the resources once we destroy the application. Okay, so here we have post module which has everything. I started the application. We already have Docker Compose up running. We already created a Prisma generate, Prisma migrate. We have already done that. Now we can just look into the documentation, like what all GraphQL APIs we are getting. This is just a simple CRUD create post, and then we have some mutations is like create post, update post, delete post. Now we can play with this. We are just running a mutation, and then I can just simply do a query, give me all the posts, remove mutations and trigger the query, and you get the data, right? So this is just a simple example, simple and stupid, nothing much, nothing complex, just to refresh our concepts of how we were dealing with the Prisma, like how we were doing a Prisma generate, Prisma migrate, and then writing Prisma surveys, and then writing the different modules which were using the Prisma clients to read, write, and update data. Here we were using just post service and post resolver. Post resolver is calling post service. Post service is using Prisma client to do all different operations on this entity. Okay, so this is pretty much. Now we are going to talk about little more complex example of nestjs GraphQL with the Prisma, which has authentication, authorizations, and multiple entities and a lot of relationship between them. Okay, so stay tuned. I will post that as a next video.